So I'm going through ideas and challenges that could spice up my channel content, so I don't bore you with constant stall reviews. Seeing people just straight up play the game as intended is quite a rarity these days, you know? I'm sure you've heard that the players made their own additional rules or tasks to make the game more interesting. For example, the most famous Sims challenge has got to be the Legacy Challenge. In it, you start off on a huge empty lot with 0 simoleons to your name and have to make a huge family with tons of children and a big mansion at the end. Another popular one is Rags to Riches Challenge, where you try to earn money using different methods to go from being poor and homeless to rich and famous. And then there's also the Runaway Teen Challenge, where you start off with nothing as a teen and make a life for yourself. And then there's also the Black Widow Challenge, where you go through different spouses. Not before getting all of their assets and killing them in different ways, obviously. And am I the only person noticing a pattern here? So many challenges made by the community surround the topic of poverty and getting out of it. I feel like it comes down to our human fascination with progressing through the social and economic ladder. Even though these are fictional virtual people, it's still inspiring and motivating to see them earn everything they have from a jumping point that, let's say it, is much worse than the usual player situation, literally building themselves from the ground up. In this video, I want to go through the surprisingly complex relationship The Sims has with class and wealth disparity, and because this channel is mostly about The Sims 3, I want to use this game as the main example on the topic. Specifically, since I'm becoming kind of an expert, let's say, on Sims 3 worlds, I want to see how different worlds show class differences, and if there's some kind of correlation between the design of the towns and how players play in them, and why challenges revolving around making money are so popular among Simmers. Every Sims 3 game starts with choosing a world, and it's the first time the player is confronted with, say it with me, wealth disparity. Even without having any expansion packs, the description for the first world ever in the game, Sunset Valley, already mentions that 2 of the wealthiest families living in the town are in constant power struggle as to who has the most influence over the village. In additional content to the game, there are also worlds like Twinbrook, Appaloosa Plains or Riverview, which are much poorer and run down, which coincidentally matches with most of the Sims living there being from a working class. Riverview is full of farmers. Twinbrook has many people who work in junkyards or consignment stores, and Appaloosa Plains is a very rural area with many of the Sims living off of animals. To contrast that, places like Bridgeport, Starlight Shores or Roaring Heights are obviously more urban, and with that comes a lot more Sims that are super wealthy. In the description, Bridgeport was a normal fishing town before the movie industry came in and filled it with celebrities who spend their time partying in local clubs. It's a similar story to Starlight Shores and Roaring Heights, although I have to mention that Roaring Heights is set in the 1940s. Obviously, just by looking at them, you can see that all of these worlds are vastly different, and I'm obviously not saying that no rich Sims live in the poorer towns and vice versa, but there are some trends that kind of form an image of how The Sims 3 portrays the wealthy and the poor. First, let's start with the design of the towns. In almost every world, the couple of rich families live separated from the rest of the town, with their mansions being built higher than the rest of the buildings, so they can look out at the rest of the city. These huge lots are usually also far away from any community buildings, so that no random Sims walk around the rich neighborhoods. Contrast that with how clumped together the poorer Sims live, and you'll start to recognize a pattern. First, let's take a look at the blueprint for every world in The Sims 3, Sunset Valley. There are 3 true mansions in the town. The Altos and the Landgrabs live on the highest hill in the town, and the only way to get there is through a single road. But don't worry, there is also an empty lot so that your Sims can also climb the economic ladder and end up on top of the hill and look down, literally and metaphorically, on the rest of Sunset Valley. The most iconic Sims family, the Goths, also live atop of a hill with a separate road leading just to them. Because of their status, they can even afford to bury their own ancestors in their own lot, away from all of the other families. Having said all of that, let's look at the bigger picture and go to Bridgeport. To see how worlds affect how people play the game, let's look at 3 worlds that all differently represent wealth disparity and how they treat rich Sims and poor Sims. Before you achieve success in any world, you have to start with an empty lot or a starter house. Starter houses come in different shapes and sizes, but the most interesting example has got to be Bridgeport, a city world added with The Sims 3 Late Night that also added apartments. Because of that, a single sim with starting funds can choose a few apartments to start living in the big city, but they are all poorly kept or under construction. There are also a few of normal houses, but they are all far away from the city and the game wants you to pick living in an apartment. Because the main appeal of the pack is becoming a celebrity and being filthy rich, I feel like it's a conscious decision to make the houses your Sims start in not appealing at all, so you want to move out of them and live in the big expensive mansions that are obviously far away from the town, looking over the city from the hilltops, and are far away from the common folk who live paycheck to paycheck. My observation on how the richer Sims are the higher they live also applies here. 2 of the poorest residents in Bridgeport live on the ground, while almost every other Sim lives in a high-rise apartment. Polly Maloney literally lives in a basement and Buster Round lives in a garage on the ground floor. Bars that are accessible to poorer Sims are also usually on the ground floor or in the basement, while the highest skyscrapers are reserved for the elite 5-star celebrities. While on the topic, Bridgeport is also one of the only towns in The Sims 3 where your Sims cannot go everywhere. Almost every club in the city has a VIP area, or sometimes the entire building is blocked behind a red rope and a bouncer. The only way to pass through it is to bribe the bouncer, try to sneak in, or to be a celebrity. But these places don't want you there if you are not rich and famous. If your Sim is famous, they will also start to receive free gifts, free drinks, or will be even paid to go to some clubs, which is funny seeing as these are the people that need it the least. The celebrity system is so integral to how Bridgeport works that it's also the only world in the game where poor Sims cannot visit the wealthy without proving themselves to the elite first. Not being wealthy influences so much of gameplay in Bridgeport. Rich Sims can get somewhere quicker if they live on the other side of the town because of their super speedy, expensive cars, and the rest has to move using the subway, which takes longer but allows them to go anywhere in town, apart from the wealthy neighborhood, of course. Bridgeport is a big city that doesn't like poor Sims. It gives opportunities to make it out of the poverty, but overall it pushes the player to make money and leave other brokies behind. I also cannot be the only person to find that becoming a celebrity can be quite easy, only if you start hanging out with other celebrities, even if you don't have any money or any skills or talents. Hey, I'm sorry for interrupting this video, but I want to take a minute here to announce that I've opened up a Ko-fi page for my YouTube channel, so if you want to support me by donating, I'll be very thankful. I don't want to start any memberships since my content is not so regular and I would also just feel bad about it. I want to be clear that it's fully optional and that there is no content behind a paywall. It's just a thing that you can do to help me raise for a new computer or a better microphone. If you are interested in learning more, go to the description to see more information. Now, I don't want to waste more of your time, so let's go to Twinbrook. The situation is quite different in worlds that are meant to be more rural and filled with poor Sims. Let's look at Twinbrook as an example, which in my opinion is the world with the most working class and realistically portrayed Sims. The main subject of the Ambitions expansion pack, which added Twinbrook, is the addition of more regular and a few irregular jobs and professions, such as stylists, firefighters and ghost hunters, so that means that this world is literally built around working. Just by looking at some of the views, you can immediately tell that Twinbrook is much more gritty, industrial and raw than most other Sims 3 worlds. It has broken train tracks, junkyards, lots of trash and rundown buildings. In its history, you learn that a huge part of this town is the dam that left half of the town in a muddy swamp. What I find super interesting is that the richest Sims in Twinbrook either came from money or earned it through shady tactics, like working in the criminal career. Before someone comments, I'll say this. I know that many of the houses look bad or run down on purpose, so that Sims who work in the architect or stylist career have something to do, but it doesn't deter from how it almost unites all of the different families based on how everybody has a weird looking home and just doesn't dress well. Compared to Bridgeport, it's not that easy to distinguish between the poorest Sims with those who do well for themselves, and it's definitely affecting how subconsciously players play in this neighborhood. There are a couple of starter houses in Twinbrook, but the area that stands out the most is the swampy space far away from the town center. The obvious thing I'm gonna mention here is that it's the lowest part of the world. So again, 343, the poorest Sims live the lowest on the map. And I don't know if I'm looking too far into this, but it seems to me that because this pack is more about living day to day, improving step by step, and is much more connected to real life experience, it's much easier to slowly improve your house and try to help out your neighborhood instead of rushing to live in a mansion. Twinbrook doesn't have any VIP exclusive areas, and there's honestly kind of the opposite issue here. Sims that are filthy rich might feel out of place in most of the community lots or even houses, because these spaces are mostly designed with the idea of a small village where everyone knows each other. Being a rich celebrity in Twinbrook seems weird, because rich Sims here are more of an afterthought. There are a couple of mansions, again, tucked away from the world and on a bit of a higher ground, but they are all close together. They are not that far away or in an exclusive area, and this space could easily just be another residential neighborhood for middle-income households, and it wouldn't look out of place, which cannot be said for Bridgeport or Sunset Valley even. I feel like I've mentioned Twinbrook and Bridgeport because they are on the two ends of the spectrum, and I advise you to see how playing in these worlds affect your storylines or how you build and make your Sims. The Sims 3 is diverse with its worlds. Twinbrook is rural and more industrial, while Bridgeport is more flashy and wealthy. And then there's Hidden Springs. I had to include a third category because in The Sims 3 there are also worlds with storyline of them being a getaway for rich Sims and celebrities. I could have easily put Barnacle Bay here, because the storylines for it and Hidden Springs are basically identical, but I've yet to cover anything Hidden Springs related on this channel, and I just finished shitting on Barnacle Bay in my previous video, so Hidden Springs it is. This town is unique because the richest family lives near the center and very low to the ground. In a place where mountains and hills are everywhere, it's more of a status symbol to live near water, so the farther you go from it, the less mansions there are. Hidden Springs is home to many rich Sims who live here to relax and move away from their stressful lives of being CEOs. So there may not be that many huge mansions, but there are still lots of expensive houses scattered all around town. Even though there are glimpses of the countryside, there are no farmhouses or farmers, so the perfectly clean and rich village wouldn't be lowered in value because of the poor folk living there. This illusion quickly breaks, however, when you go to the other side of the town. Hidden Springs is not free of the less wealthy, but it packs them all into one area with dirt roads, old-timey cabins, and basically nothing else. If you want to play with your own Sims, it's very likely that this is where you'll start. Almost all of the town is not exclusive to the rich, but is very much implied to be a classic and a bit modern just for the wealthy, and poor Sims just happen to also be in those places sometimes. I think you see now why I wanted to mention Hidden Springs while I talk about this topic. In a world full of rich Sims living in expensive houses, somehow, at least for me, The most charming and interesting part of the town is the remote, cheap area with poor Sims. Because of this contrast, some Simmers will likely gravitate to playing as gold diggers, or they will try to buy out one of the expensive houses on the hills by just earning the money. But then, there's a makeshift lodge made to resemble a motel for travelers in the world, so technically you can even play as a homeless Sim and have access to beds, showers and food every day. Now, to be real with you, I'm not the biggest fan of Hidden Springs, but it's also one of the towns that is somewhere in the middle of this conversation. Rich and famous Sims make most of its population, but the minority of Sims who are here from the beginning make the town feel interesting and unique. Because of this contrast, Hidden Springs has a nice mix of cozy venues for families and nature-loving Sims, but also some more modern, slick lots for rich snobs and famous douchebags. In conclusion, it's obviously not that deep. I doubt that the devs were thinking so much about the placement of every lot and what it meant for the socio-economic state of the world. I feel like most of the similarities I found might be a result of the overall associations people have with certain groups. In League of Legends, for example, the wealthy also live above the poor. Many of the things can also just be explained by the way the game works. Obviously, Bridgeport is going to have lots of VIP exclusive areas because it's the only world that can do that, since it added the entire celebrity system and EA wanted to use it and show it in multiple settings. Same with Twinbrook. Since it came with an expansion pack that added many jobs and professions, obviously Sims living in it will mostly be working class to show the new features of the expansion pack. Also, things like how the mansions are never close to the city centers can also boil down to the performance issues, since mansions usually have much more objects and textures to load than small homes with one Sim living in them. The Sims, as a franchise, is a satire of real life, so it's natural that it will sometimes mimic how we live in real life, and these stereotypes or tropes are much bigger than just one dev's biases. Still, I feel like there is something interesting about the obsession with making money and becoming rich quick in The Sims that, in a small way, is affected by the worlds and their design. If your Sim can afford a mansion, then they can probably afford a fast car, and because Sims 3 is an open world game, there are functional streets and mansions that are usually far away from the town center, so it makes sense for the player to want to go somewhere quicker than a regular taxi. That's why this system wouldn't work in The Sims 4, but that's a story for another day and maybe someone else who knows more about it than I do. I don't think that I made a huge discovery or something, but the next time you play Rags to Riches or try the Legacy Challenge and then get bored after the 3rd generation, I want you to think if you were influenced at all by the world you played in and the expansion pack you wanted to test out. 'Cause maybe, just maybe, all this time, the game has been playing you. I would love to hear your opinions in the comments, because I love reading every single one of them. I'm super proud to see the discussion my last video made, and I can't wait to see what you guys think about this video. Once in a while, I want to try out something more abstract for video ideas, to keep my channel fresh and a bit more unique than just the standard reviews. So let me know what other topics you would like to see covered here. Don't forget to like and subscribe and check out my Ko-fi page if you are interested. And having said all of that, I wish you all happy rest of the day and just, yeah, thank you for watching.